hold on, everybody. Hold on. Give me a second with the big guy. Hold on. Okay, big buddy. What brings a mountain ogre to my tavern?
Sad.
Awa sad. Oh, that's your name, Awa?
Not Awa.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Awa. Would you like to tell me why you're so sad?
Awa. No tell.
Fair enough, Awa. What if I told you a story about another someone who was sad? Do you think that might help? Maybe you can tell me after?
Okay.
Oh, wonderful, okay. Now go ahead and sit down anywhere you'd like, and... Yeah, just like that. Okay, Wheeze, can you fetch our new customer a barrel of wine from the back? Thank you very much.
Tavern Keep, are you sure about this? You're a bit insane.
Wheeze, I'm well aware of my own insanity. Now can you please go fetch the barrel of wine before our new customer smashes us?
Oh, yes, sir. Right away, sir.
Right then. Bard, Amumu ambiance, please. Let's get this story going.
The gods were angry and shook the land, and cracks rent the earth,
said old Khaldun, his crag-featured face lit by firelight.
It was into one of these fissures that the young man ventured. He found an opening, the entrance to a tomb, hidden for the jackal knows how long. The man had little ones to feed, and a wife to please, and so he ventured in, lured by opportunity.
Adults and children alike crowded in close to hear the old storyteller's words. They were all weary. They had traveled far that day, and the Shuriman sun had been unrelenting. But Khaldun's tales were a rare treat. They drew their cloaks tight around their shoulders against the chill of the night, and leaned in.
The air was cool in the tomb, a merciful relief from the scorching heat outside. The young man lit a torch. Its light made shadows dance before him. He stepped cautiously, weary of traps. He was poor, but he was no fool. The walls inside were smooth obsidian and carved with ancient writings and images. He could not read. He was a simple man, but he studied the images. He saw a boy prince, sitting cross-legged upon a sun disk borne by a team of servants, a beaming smile upon his face. Chests of coins and riches were piled before him, the offerings of strangely garbed, bowing emissaries. He saw other carvings, again showing the smiling prince, this time walking among his people. Their heads were pressed to the ground before him. Stylized rays of sunshine radiated from the boy's crown. Before one of the images was a small gold statue. It alone was worth more than he could have hoped to earn in 10 lifetimes. He looked upon one of the last images before he left the tomb. It showed the boy prince dead, lying upon a bier. Those closest to him were wailing, but further back people were celebrating. Had the boy prince been beloved, or had he been a tyrant? There was no way of knowing. It was when he heard it, a sound in the darkness that made his skin crawl. He looked around, wide-eyed, holding his torch up before him. Nothing.
Who's there?
He said. Silence was his only answer. The young man shook his head.
It's just the wind, you fool,
he thought.
Nothing but the wind.
And then he heard it again, more distinctly this time. A child was crying in the darkness, further into the tomb. Heard anywhere else, his paternal instinct would have been to go to the sound. But here, in the darkness of a funeral tomb, he wanted to run, but he did not. The sobbing touched his heart. It was filled with such misery and grief. Was it possible that there was another entrance to this tomb? Had the young boy found his way down here and become lost? Torch held high, he crept forward. The weeping continued, echoing faintly through the gloom. A wide chamber opened before him, its floor black and highly reflective. Golden artifacts and jewel-inlaid walls glinted within, and gingerly he entered the room. He stepped back sharply as his heels sent ripples spreading out across the floor. Water? The floor was not made of reflective obsidian. It was covered in water. Kneeling, he scooped a handful of it to his lips. He spat it out immediately. It was salt water. Here, in the heart of Shurima, 1,000 leagues from the nearest sea. He heard the sound of the boy, weeping once more. Closer now. Holding his torch before him, the young man glimpsed a shape at the edge of its light. It appeared to be the child, sitting with his back to the man. Carefully he stepped into the room. The water upon the floor was not deep. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and fear clutched at his chest. Yet he did not turn to run.
Are you lost?
He asked, as he stepped closer.
How did you get here?
The shadow figure did not turn, but he did speak.
I don't remember.
He said. The sound swam around the young man, echoing off the walls. The boy spoke in an old dialect. His words were strange, but understandable.
I don't remember who I am.
Be calm, child.
Said the man.
All will be well.
He stepped closer, and the figure resolved itself before him. His eyes widened. The shape before him was a god statue carved in onyx. Nothing more. It was not the source of the crying, nor of the child's voice. That was when a small, dry hand grabbed him.
The youngest of the listeners gasped, his eyes wide. The other children laughed in false bravado. Old Khaldun smiled, a golden tooth glistening in the fire. Then he continued.
The young man looked down. The linen-wrapped corpse of a tiny prince stood beside the man. Dull, ghostly light emanated from the deathly boy's eye sockets. Though his entire face was bound in burial wrappings, the corpse child held the man's hand.
Will you be my friend?
The boy asked, his voice muffled by linen.
The young man lurched backwards, breaking free of the child's grasp. The young man looked down at his arm in horror. His hand was shriveling, turning black and withered. The wasting touch then began to climb up his arm. He turned and ran, and in his shock and haste, he dropped his lantern. It hissed as it fell into the lake of tears, and darkness descended. Still, he could just make out the glow of daylight up ahead. He ran towards it, scrambling desperately, even as the wasting death crept up his arm towards his heart. At any moment, he expected to feel the deathly boy's grasp upon him, but did not. After what felt like an eternity, but could only have been a matter of heartbeats, he burst from the darkness into the desert heat once more.
I'm sorry.
Echoed a mournful voice from the gloom behind him.
I didn't mean to.
And thus, the tomb of Amumu was unearthed, said old Khaldun, and the deathly child released into the world.
But everyone knows he isn't real.
Cried one of the children, the oldest of them, after a moment of silence.
Amumu is real.
Said the youngest.
He's wandering the land trying to find a friend.
He is real, but he isn't a boy.
Said another.
He's a yordle.
Khaldun laughed, and pushed himself to his feet with the aid of a gnarled walking stick.
I am old, and we have far to travel tomorrow, he said. It is past time I was abed.
His audience began to dissipate, smiling and talking in low, familial voices, but one child did not move. She stared at Khaldun, unblinking.
Grandfather,
She said.
how did you lose your arm?
Old Khaldun looked down at the empty sleeve pinned to his shoulder, then flashed the girl a grin. "Good night, little one," he said with a wink. All right, Awa. Awa. What did you think?
Friend.
Yeah, maybe you kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. Is that what we're getting at with why you're sad?
Job.
What? Why didn't you say so, Awa?
Tavern Keep, don't
Seems
you
like
do it, don't you
Weeze can
dare
use
do
some
it,
help
don't
on the
you give it a
weekends.
job,
We can
Tavern
crush
Keep,
grapes,
don't you please,
make
don't do
so
it. No,
much
Tavern
money off of
Keep,
wine.
no.
You're hired. Yeah! Grapes all around. Hey everybody, thank you for stopping by the tavern this week. I hope you enjoyed the reading of Little Amumu's story. I know the voice wasn't exactly spot on, but Amumu's voice actress, Christina Militia, is kind of a god, so I had to make my own Amumu adaptation. Be sure to stop back every Wednesday for another story. Clicky that subscribe and bell, and drop me a comment. Let me know what champ you would like to hear about next. Cheers!